Not every Hollywood fairy tale gets a happy ending. Some of the biggest stars, once rising from nothing with inspiring rags to riches stories, end up losing everything in ways no one saw coming. Whether it's the grip of addiction, the weight of mental health struggles, or disastrous financial choices, fame isn't always forever. While a few manage to claw their way back, others hit rock bottom with no way up. From red carpets to sleeping on the streets, their falls from grace are as shocking as their rises to fame. Stay tuned to uncover which celebrities went from A-list luxury to life with no roof over their heads. Margot Kidder. She was Hollywood royalty, the unforgettable Lois Lane in Superman, a name that once lit up marquees. Margot Kidder wasn't just a movie star, she was a fixture among the elite, romantically linked to icons like Richard Pryor and even Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. But fame can be fleeting, and for Kidder, the descent was as dramatic as any movie plot. In 1996, headlines took a chilling turn when she was found wandering the streets of Los Angeles, unrecognizable. Schizophrenia and severe depression had taken hold, leaving the once glamorous actress sleeping in cardboard boxes and backyards. Witnesses described her as disheveled, her hair hacked short, her front teeth missing, far from the red carpets she once graced. She asked strangers for cigarettes, and kind-hearted passers-by occasionally paid for a night at a motel. But her reality was heartbreaking. She was homeless, surviving day to day. Eventually, she was found behind a bush in Glendale, living out of a box. Police and family intervened, and she was taken to a private psychiatric clinic where she finally accepted treatment. Kidder later became a passionate advocate for mental health, speaking openly about her struggles. In a haunting reflection on her past, she once said, "We are all just a breath away from mental illness, homelessness, all these things we tend to look down on." Erin Moran. At just 14, Erin Moran was a household name, stealing hearts as Joni Cunningham on Happy Days. But real life was far from the scripted sitcom magic. After the show ended, so did the steady paychecks, and instead of securing her fortune, Moran burned through her wealth at an alarming rate. By 2010, the child star's California home was foreclosed, leaving her with nowhere to go. Desperate, she and her husband moved into his elderly mother's trailer in Indiana, but this was no fresh start. Struggles with substance abuse and reckless spending followed her, and one night, after returning home from drinking, a heated fight with her mother-in-law ended with Moran being kicked out of the trailer park. With no stable home, she drifted from motel to motel, surviving on what little she had left. Her final days were a tragic echo of a life that once held so much promise. She was spotted looking frail and disoriented near a roadside inn, a shadow of the vibrant star she once was. In the end, she died broke and homeless, succumbing to a heroin overdose, a devastating end for a woman who once had America cheering for her. Donna Plato. She was America's sweetheart, the lovable Kimberly Drummond on Different Strokes. But behind the scenes, Dana Plato's life was unraveling long before the cameras stopped rolling. By 14, she was already experimenting with drugs, and once the show ended, so did her safety net. Hollywood had no more roles for her, and life outside the spotlight was unforgiving. As her career faded, her descent into addiction and crime began. In 1991, she robbed a video store at gunpoint for a measly $164, and just a year later, she was caught forging a prescription for Valium. Jail time and rehab stints followed, but nothing seemed to pull her back from the brink. By 1999, she was bouncing between cheap motels in Oklahoma, homeless, and clinging to what little hope she had left. Then came her final public appearance. On The Howard Stern Show, she insisted she was clean and sober, but the audience wasn't convinced. Callers mocked her, questioned her struggles, and tore her down on live radio. Less than 24 hours later, Dana Plato was found dead in her motorhome from a lethal overdose of prescription drugs. The world saw it as another tragic accident, but the official ruling? Suicide. A cruel, heartbreaking end for a woman who once had it all. Lonnie Willison, once a sought-after fitness model, gracing magazine covers and living a glamorous life, Lonnie Willison had it all. At the height of her success, she was married to Baywatch star Jeremy Jackson, seemingly living a Hollywood dream. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. Meth addiction, mental health struggles, and a turbulent marriage sent her life into freefall. After her violent split from Jackson, she spiraled deeper into addiction and paranoia. She claimed he once tried to strangle her, an accusation that marked the beginning of her descent into homelessness. But her struggles didn't stop there. Lonnie developed extreme delusions, convinced that she couldn't live indoors because of electricity exposure. She insisted that she had been electrocuted every day for almost a year and that her body could detect chemicals, batteries, and different metals. Today, she's a ghost of her former self, spotted wandering the streets of Venice Beach, barefoot, digging through dumpsters, and refusing help. Whether her words stem from genuine suffering or the deep grip of addiction, one thing is certain: Lonnie Willison's story is one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking downfalls. MC Hammer. In the 90s, MC Hammer was unstoppable. With 3 Grammys, chart-topping hits, and dance moves that defined a generation, he was more than a rapper. He was a cultural icon. From You Can't Touch This to his signature parachute pants, Hammer time was everywhere, even in his own animated series, Hammerman. But when the money started rolling in, so did the reckless spending. At the peak of his fame, Hammer lived like royalty. He dropped $30 million just on renovating his 40,000-square-foot mansion, stocked his garage with 17 luxury cars, 2 helicopters, and a private jet, and even owned racehorses. And if that wasn't enough, he kept over 200 employees on payroll, burning through cash like it would never run out. But music trends changed. His popularity faded, and the money stopped flowing. But his spending didn't. Soon it all came crashing down. Hammer was $3 million in debt, owed the IRS over $800,000, and had to sell everything: his mansion, cars, and even his horses. At one point, he was on the brink of homelessness. But unlike many who fell from grace, Hammer clawed his way back, downsizing to a modest home, organizing concerts, and making smart investments. Hammer time might have ended, but MC Hammer refused to be counted out. If you enjoyed this video, drop a 1 in the comments, and if not, let me know with a 0. I appreciate your feedback. Jan Michael Vincent. Once the epitome of the all-American leading man, Jan Michael Vincent had everything: fame, fortune, and a career that made him a household name. Best known for his role in Airwolf, he was a 70s and 80s heartthrob, with beach-ready looks and a smirk that made Hollywood swoon. But beneath the surface, his demons were catching up to him fast. Addiction became his downward spiral. Cocaine and alcohol weren't just occasional indulgences. They were constant companions. Between 1977 and 1979, he racked up arrests for cocaine possession, and by the mid-80s, his rap sheet included felony assault, bar brawls, and multiple DUIs. His drinking turned his life into a train wreck, literally. A string of violent car crashes left him with shattered bones, and eventually doctors amputated his right leg, leaving him reliant on a prosthetic limb or a wheelchair. As the years dragged on, Hollywood stopped calling, and Vincent vanished into obscurity. His health, finances, and career were beyond saving, and he spent his final years living in seclusion in rural Mississippi and North Carolina, a far cry from the bright lights of Hollywood. By the time he passed away at 74, the man who once had it all had lost everything. Leif Garrett. In the 70s, Leif Garrett was everywhere. The golden-haired teen idol with $1 million smile and legions of screaming fans. But fame at a young age can be a curse, and for Garrett, it was the beginning of a slow-motion disaster. By 14, he was already hooked on drugs, and just before turning 18, he wrecked his mother's Porsche while on a cocaine run. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit, and the crash left his best friend permanently paralyzed, a tragedy that haunted him for life. But instead of getting clean, Garrett spiraled deeper into addiction, racking up arrests for heroin and cocaine use. By 2001, his fortune was gone. Filing for bankruptcy, he listed his only assets as clothes, household goods, and a measly $350 in cash. With no steady income beyond a $1,000 monthly allowance from his mother, he had no home, no career, and no way out. His homelessness became public when Sharon Osbourne famously quipped, "Leif Garrett is living under a bridge, and he's saving a place for you, Justin Bieber." A cruel joke, but a harsh reality. Despite multiple rehab stints and jail time, Garrett never fully escaped his demons, becoming yet another cautionary tale of fame gone horribly wrong. Mindy McCready. She had the voice, the talent, and the fame. Mindy McCready was once one of country music's rising stars. But behind the chart-topping success, her life was unraveling. Addiction, mental illness, and heartbreak turned her world into a dark spiral that she couldn't escape. McCready's struggles landed her in a court-ordered rehab, but her breaking point came when her boyfriend was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Just a month later, in the very same place, Mindy took her own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The tragedy didn't end there. The police arrived to find a chilling scene. Before pulling the trigger, she had also shot her dog. What pushed her over the edge? Many believe it was the devastating news that her 2 children would be taken away and sent to live with her estranged mother. It was the final blow in a life filled with addiction, loss, and deep personal demons. From country music stardom to an unthinkable end, Mindy McCready's story remains one of the most heartbreaking tragedies in music history. David Cassidy. At the height of his fame, David Cassidy was the ultimate teen heartthrob. His boyish charm and golden voice made the Partridge Family a cultural phenomenon. But the bright lights of Hollywood couldn't shield him from his personal demons, and over the years, his life spiraled into addiction, arrests, and homelessness. Cassidy's struggles with alcohol and drugs became public knowledge when he was arrested for DUI in 2010. But that was just the beginning. By 2013 and 2014, he was arrested again for drunk driving, exposing his crippling addiction. He later admitted to being an alcoholic, but that confession did little to stop his downward spiral. As the years went on, his personal life unraveled. Failed marriages, estranged children, and a chaotic history of arrests, including buying narcotics and soliciting prostitutes, painted a picture of a man losing control. By the end of his career, Cassidy was homeless, a devastating fate for someone who once had the world at his feet. Ray Williams. Basketball was his life. Sugar Ray Williams was once an NBA superstar, a former captain of the New York Knicks, and a key player for the 1985 Boston Celtics NBA Finals team. But despite years on the court, his post-retirement life didn't come with the financial security many would expect from a pro athlete. By 2010, he was found living out of his Buick in Pompano Beach, Florida, homeless, forgotten, and struggling to survive. Unlike many fallen stars, Williams wasn't battling addiction. No drugs, no alcohol, no gambling debts. Just bad luck, misfortune, and a league that didn't look out for its former players. In a heartbreaking interview, he called out the NBA, saying, "When I played the game, they always talked about loyalty to the team. Well, where's the loyalty and compassion for ex-players who are hurting?" After retiring, He filed for bankruptcy and struggled to keep steady work, watching from the sidelines as modern NBA salaries skyrocketed. But the game didn't wait for him. In 2013, Williams passed away from colon cancer, leaving behind a story that serves as a stark reminder that even legends can be left behind. Bobby Driscoll. At one time, Bobby Driscoll was Disney's golden boy, an Academy Award-winning child actor and the voice of Peter Pan himself. But fairy tales don't always have happy endings. His transition from child star to adult actor was brutal, and when Hollywood no longer had a place for him, his life spiraled into addiction, crime, and homelessness. Driscoll's downfall was swift. As roles dried up, he turned to drugs, leading to a prison sentence for narcotics possession. Even after his release, he couldn't escape his demons. With no steady work, no home, and no future, he wandered aimlessly through life, trying to rebuild the identity Hollywood had stripped from him. In a haunting interview, he admitted, "I became a beatnik and a bum. I had no residence. My clothes were at my parents' house, but I didn't live anywhere." By 1968, his tragic journey came to an end in the most heartbreaking way. 2 children found his body in an abandoned Manhattan building. With no ID, no money, and no one to claim him, the once beloved Disney star was buried in an unmarked grave on Hart Island. His death remained unknown for 3 years, only discovered in 1971 when reporters started researching what had happened to him. From the bright lights of Hollywood to an unclaimed body in an anonymous grave, Bobby Driscoll's fate is one of the darkest tragedies in Disney history. Iran Barkley. Iran Barkley was a warrior in the ring, a fierce competitor who took on legends and held multiple world titles. At the height of his career in the 80s and 90s, he amassed $5 million, a fortune that should have secured his future. But reckless spending, bad financial advice, and an inability to adjust to life outside the ring drained his wealth faster than he could have imagined. By 20 out of 10, the former champion was penniless, homeless, and struggling to survive on the streets of New York City. With no steady income and no place to go, Barkley found himself sleeping in subway cars, drifting from one temporary shelter to another. His niece took him in for a while, allowing him to stay at the Patterson Houses, a public housing development in the Bronx. But when she could no longer support him, he had nowhere left to turn. For a time, he stayed at a Howard Johnson hotel, scraping by with whatever little he had left, a shocking fall from grace for a man who once headlined Madison Square Garden. But even champions can make a comeback. With the help of Bronxworks and the Ring 10 boxing charity, Barkley finally found stable housing and began rebuilding his life. Instead of dwelling on the past, he used his experience to help others, teaching young amateur boxers the skills that once made him a world champion. Though life outside the ring had dealt him a crushing blow, Barkley proved that a true fighter never stays down for long. Natasha Lyonne. In the 90s, Natasha Lyonne was everywhere. With standout performances in But I'm a Cheerleader, Slums of Beverly Hills, and American Pie, she was the edgy, rebellious it girl of indie films. But fame and fortune didn't shield her from self-destruction. Behind the scenes, Lyonne's life spiraled into addiction, legal troubles, and eventually homelessness. By the early 2000s, her struggles became impossible to hide. In 2001, she was arrested for a DUI, and as her substance abuse worsened, so did her reputation. She was evicted from her Gramercy Park apartment after a series of disturbing incidents, including reports of aggressive behavior toward neighbors. With nowhere to go, Lyonne found herself bouncing between the streets, cheap motels, and friends' couches. By 2005, she was in critical condition, admitted to Beth Israel Hospital for a collapsed lung, hepatitis C, a heart infection, and severe methadone addiction, a shocking downfall for someone once at the top of Hollywood's rising stars. But Lyonne didn't stay down. After years of battling her demons, she clawed her way back into the industry, starring in Netflix's Orange is the New Black, a role that reignited her career. She went on to co-create and star in Russian Doll, a show inspired by her own chaotic past, and later led Poker Face, proving her resilience. From nearly losing it all to reclaiming her place in Hollywood, Natasha Lyonne's journey is a comeback story like no other. Danny Bonaduce. As a child star on The Partridge Family, Danny Bonaduce was a household name, living the dream of millions. But behind the fame, he battled demons that would haunt him for decades. From an early age, alcohol and drug addiction took hold, setting him on a destructive path that led to multiple stints in rehab, financial ruin, and even homelessness. At his lowest point, Bonaduce was living in his car, parked behind the iconic Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. The irony? He was still famous. In a surreal twist, fans would ask for autographs, take pictures with him, and then walk away, completely unaware that the former child star was living behind a dumpster. Reflecting on the experience, he once said, "I was still famous and people had no idea I lived behind a dumpster. I'd be taking pictures and signing autographs." Despite his struggles, Bonaduce fought his way back. He reinvented himself as a radio personality, hosting a popular drive time show on WSY, and even found stability in his personal life, remarrying and leaving his troubled past behind. However, his health took a toll. Diagnosed with hydrocephalus, he eventually retired from radio after undergoing brain surgery. While his journey has been filled with highs and devastating lows, Bonaduce's resilience proves that even in the darkest moments, a comeback is always possible. We truly appreciate you for sticking around and watching our video. Leave a 2 in the comments to let me know you are still here with us. Houston McTeer. At one point, Houston McTeer was the fastest man on Earth. As a high schooler, he stunned the world by running a 100-yard dash in just 9.0 seconds, tying the world record. From poverty in Florida to the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1978, his future seemed limitless. He trained under Muhammad Ali and Harold Smith, qualified for the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, and was on the verge of international stardom. But then, life threw him a cruel twist. The U.S. boycotted the 1980 Olympics, robbing McTeer of his chance to compete. From there, his life spiraled out of control. With his support system crumbling, he turned to drugs, and by the mid-'80s he was homeless, spending 3 years sleeping on Santa Monica Beach. He survived by eating at the Claire Foundation, a mission for the homeless, and wandering the streets, a heartbreaking downfall for an athlete once hailed as the next great sprinter. But even after losing everything, McTeer fought back. With the help of an older woman who took him in, he rebuilt his life and found love again, eventually marrying Swedish sprinter Linda Haglund. Though his story took a devastating turn, McTeer's resilience proved that even the fastest man can stumble, but he can also rise again. Brett Butler. In the 90s, Brett Butler was on top of the world. As the sharp-witted lead of ABC's Grace Under Fire, she became one of TV's most recognizable faces, even earning a Golden Globe nomination. But behind the scenes, her life was crumbling. Drug addiction, rehab stints, and financial missteps slowly drained away her fortune, and Hollywood eventually shut its doors on her. Though she fought to get clean, the damage was done. Leaving Los Angeles, Butler retreated to a farm in Georgia, choosing a quieter life with 15 pets as her only companions. But when her money ran out, reality hit hard. She had no savings, no income, and no safety net. And in a shocking turn, she ended up in a homeless shelter. Determined to make a comeback, Butler has since resurfaced in Los Angeles, performing stand-up comedy and pitching a reality show about her self-professed psychic abilities. Her journey from primetime success to rock bottom is a sobering reminder of how quickly fame and fortune can disappear. But for Butler, the fight isn't over yet. Willie Ames. At his peak, Willie Ames was a Hollywood golden boy, starring in hit shows like 8 is Enough and Charles in Charge. With $1 million annual salary, fame, and a seemingly perfect life, he never imagined that everything could disappear overnight. But when the jobs dried up, so did his fortune. And in a shocking twist, Ames found himself homeless, broke, and completely alone. The fall was brutal. He lost his job, his bank account, his wife, and his child. With nowhere to turn, he slept in parking garages, under bushes, and in city parks, struggling to accept how fast his life had unraveled. Reflecting on those dark days, he once admitted, "At the peak of 8 is Enough, I was making over $1 million a year. Then suddenly, no job, no bank account, no wife, no child. I never dreamed it could happen that fast." He described the shame of laying under bushes at night, wondering if this was how his story would end. But Ames wasn't down for good. Determined to rebuild his life, he trained as a financial advisor, passing licensing exams and helping others avoid the financial mistakes that cost him everything. Eventually, he found his way back to Hollywood, returning to acting and filmmaking, now splitting his time between Vancouver and Los Angeles. His journey from wealth to homelessness and back again is a testament to resilience, because sometimes, even after losing everything, there's still a way back. Rocky Lockridge. Once a junior lightweight champion, Rocky Lockridge was a powerhouse in the ring, earning fame, fortune, and respect. But when his boxing career ended in 1992, so did his stability. Addiction took hold, and in a devastating downward spiral, he lost everything: his wife, his children, his fortune, and even his dignity. By 1997, his life had completely unraveled. He was arrested for burglary and sentenced to 27 months in prison. But even after his release, things only got worse. For nearly a decade, Lockridge lived on the streets of New Jersey, a former champion reduced to homelessness. Years of alcohol and drug abuse, combined with the brutal toll of his boxing career, left his body broken. He suffered a stroke while living on the streets, leaving him permanently weakened and struggling to walk. Despite once having fame, wealth, and education, Lockridge's reckless lifestyle, parties every weekend, heavy alcohol and cocaine use, and careless spending, destroyed everything he had built. His story serves as a tragic reminder of how quickly fortune can fade, even for those who once stood at the top. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye wasn't just a singer, he was a force of nature. With timeless hits like What's Going On, Sexual Healing, and Let's Get It On, he redefined soul music, blending raw emotion with social consciousness. His influence stretched far beyond Motown, making him a pioneer whose voice resonated across generations. But behind the smooth vocals and legendary performances, his personal life was anything but harmonious. Gaye battled addiction, financial ruin, and deep family conflicts, all while struggling to maintain the genius that made him famous. His relationship with his father was particularly toxic, marked by years of tension and resentment. Despite his inner demons, his music remained a powerful outlet, a mirror of his struggles and a soundtrack for social change. Then, on April 1st, 1984, tragedy struck. Just a day before his 45th birthday, Gaye was shot and killed by his father during a heated argument in their Los Angeles home. The world was left in shock. The voice that had defined a generation was gone in an instant. But while his life ended in heartbreak, his legacy remains untouchable. Decades later, his music still speaks, his influence still lingers, and his story continues to captivate and inspire. Amanda Peterson. In the late 80s, Amanda Peterson was every teenager's dream girl. As Cindy Mancini in Can't Buy Me Love, starring alongside Patrick Dempsey, she became an overnight sensation. her charm and effortless beauty cementing her as a beloved teen idol. But while fans saw the perfect cheerleader on screen, her real life was far from a fairy tale. Behind the scenes, Peterson battled substance abuse and mental health struggles, demons that only grew stronger as her career began to fade. Unable to find stability in Hollywood, she stepped away from the industry, retreating from public life in hopes of finding peace. But her personal hardships overshadowed the bright promise of her early success, and her struggles with addiction persisted. Then, on July 3, 2015, just days before her 44th birthday, Peterson's life came to a heartbreaking end. An accidental drug overdose cut short a life once filled with so much promise, leaving fans mourning the loss of a talent that could have been so much more. Though her time in Hollywood was brief, her impact as a teen icon remains unforgettable.